The winter had lasted 3 years. 3 years of endless snow of ice that never melted, of cold so deep it had killed the forest and frozen the rivers solid. 3 years since the sun had truly shone. In the Sawtooth Mountains of central Idaho, where the Stormfrost pack had ruled for 1,000 generations, wolves were dying. Not from battle, not from disease, from the cold itself. And in a small cave at the base of the mountain, far from the great stone fortress, where the AlphaKing and his court huddled against the unnatural winter, a young Omega named Seren Ashglade was also dying. She sat curled against the cave wall, her thin body wrapped in a threadbare cloak that did nothing against the cold. Her silver hair, the mark of her Omega blood, hung lank and dirty around her gaunt face. Her ribs showed clearly beneath her skin. She hadn't eaten in 4 days, maybe 5. Time blurred when you were starving. But even dying, even frozen and hollow with hunger, Seren's mind was sharp, because she knew things others had forgotten. Her grandmother had taught her before the old woman died, before Seren's pack had cast her out for being useless. An Omega with no mate, no family, no value. Just another mouth to feed. Seren's fingers trembled as she reached for the small leather pouch hanging from her belt, the only thing of value she still possessed. Inside were dried herbs her grandmother had given her years ago. Precious, rare. Impossible to find now that the eternal winter had killed every living plant. She opened the pouch with shaking hands and looked inside. 3 types of herbs carefully wrapped in cloth to protect them. Each one a miracle. Each one a memory of her grandmother's weathered hands and patient voice. Frost whisper root, silver white and twisted like a tiny frozen tree. It smelled of mint and winter mornings and something else, something that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen on cold nights. Seren could almost hear grandmother Narita's voice as she held the root. The old ways are dying, little one, but you must remember, when winter comes that will not end, when the pack grows weak and the Alpha's blood runs cold, only the old ways can save them. Seren closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. She'd been 16 years old, sitting at her grandmother's bedside in those final days. The old woman's hands had been thin as parchment, but her grip had been strong when she'd pressed the leather pouch into Seren's palm. Listen carefully, child. Frost whisper root grows only in the deepest cold. It draws strength from ice itself. This will form the base of the brew, the foundation. Without it, nothing else will hold. Seren opened her eyes and carefully rewrapped the root. Her fingers found the second herb, sunwarmer leaves, golden even dried, holding the memory of summer heat in their papery surface. If she held them to the light just right, they seemed to glow from within. She remembered her grandmother's lesson about these. Sunwarmer leaves hold fire within them, Narita had whispered. They grow in the last days of summer, when the sun is still strong, but the first frost threatens. They capture that warmth, that defiance against the coming cold. These will provide the heat needed to counter the ice, the fire to melt frozen blood. The third herb made Seren's breath catch every time she saw it. Starfire petals, deep blue with silver edges that seemed to shift and shimmer even in the dim light of the cave. Rare as dragon's teeth and twice as precious. Her grandmother had given her exactly 7 of them, one for each major celestial body in the old ways. 7 perfect petals, each one worth a king's ransom. These are the most important, little one. Starfire petals bind magic together. They channel the power of the full moon and the ancient words into something that can break even a blood curse. She'd paused, her aged eyes boring into Seren's young face. Never use these unless the need is desperate. When winter comes, that will not end. When the pack grows weak and the Alpha's blood runs cold, that's when you'll need them. That's when the smallest wolf will have to be the strongest. At the time, Seren hadn't understood. She'd been young, safe, valued in her pack. Her grandmother had seemed to be speaking in riddles, like all old people did. Now 3 years into an impossible winter, sitting alone in a freezing cave with death creeping closer by the hour, she understood perfectly. This wasn't natural cold. This was a curse. A blood curse woven into an Alpha's bloodline, turning him to ice from the inside out, spreading that killing frost to his entire pack and beyond. She'd seen the signs in the stories her grandmother had told. The blue-tinged lips, the frost that clung to skin, the way warmth became a distant memory even when standing beside a roaring fire. And she knew how to break it, if only she had the strength left to try. Seren's eyes drifted closed. Exhaustion pulled at her like a tide. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe dying alone in a cave was kinder than watching the whole world freeze. She was drifting somewhere between sleep and death when she heard it. Voices, distant, coming closer. Search every cave. The AlphaKing's orders. We won't find anything. Nothing survives out here anymore. Keep looking anyway. He's desperate. Seren's eyes snapped open. The Alpha King, she knew of him, of course. Everyone did. Kale Stormfrost, last of the ancient bloodline ruler of the Stormfrost pack. They said he was dying, that the curse was killing him fastest of all, turning his blood to ice in his veins. They said the pack would fall within weeks if something didn't change. Seren pushed herself to her feet, swaying with weakness. This was it. This was the moment her grandmother had prepared her for. She could hide, let the searchers pass, die quietly in her cave. Or she could step into the light and offer what she knew, even if they rejected her. Even if they laughed at the starving Omega who thought she could save an Alpha King. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The smallest wolf carries the warmth needed to break eternal winter. Seren took a shaking breath. Then she walked to the cave entrance. 3 wolves in human form stood in the snow. Guards by their bearing. Warriors. Their faces were drawn hollow with the same hunger Seren felt. The curse was killing them all, slowly but surely. Wait, Seren called. Her voice cracked from disuse. The guards spun weapons, half-drawn. Who's there? Seren stepped into the pale gray light. All 3 guards froze. She knew what they saw. A skeleton wrapped in rags. Silver hair marking her as Omega. Eyes too large and a starving face. Worthless. That's what their expression said. Please, Seren said, forcing strength into her voice. I can help. I know what's wrong with your Alpha. With your pack. The lead guard, older with a scar running down his left cheek, barked a harsh laugh. You can barely stand. I know this isn't natural. Winter, Seren pressed on. It's a curse. A blood curse woven into the Alpha line itself. It's killing your king from the inside out. The laughter died. The guards exchanged glances. How do you know? That the scarred one demanded. My grandmother taught me the old ways, the forgotten knowledge. Seren's hand went to her herb pouch. I know how to break it. The old ways are dead, another guard scoffed. Useless superstition. Then why is your Alpha dying? Seren shot back. Why has winter lasted 3 years? Why do your healers fail? Silence. The scarred guard studied her for a long moment. Then, what's your name? Omega Seren. Well, Seren, you're either mad or a miracle. He gestured to the others. Bring her. The Alpha will decide. The Stormfrost fortress was carved from the mountain itself. A sprawling palace of stone and ice that had stood for 1,000 years. Now it was a tomb. Seren saw it as they climbed the mountain path. The great halls were dark, their once bright torches reduced to dim flickers. The courtyards that should have echoed with training warriors and playing cubs stood empty, filled only with drifts of snow that never melted. Wolves huddled in corners, wrapped in every fur and blanket they possessed, shivering despite it all. Seren saw cubs with hollow eyes, their ribs showing through their fur. She saw warriors too weak to lift their weapons. She saw elders who'd survived centuries brought low by 3 years of unnatural cold. Dying. The whole pack was dying, and judging by the desperate, hungry looks some of them gave her as she passed a starving Omega easy prey, some were already considering darker solutions to their starvation. The guards flanking her noticed too. They moved closer, protective, despite having just met her. Eyes down, the scarred one muttered to the wolves they passed. She's under the Alpha's consideration. It wasn't much protection, but it was something. The guards brought her to the throne room, a massive chamber with walls of white stone veined with silver and a ceiling that arched high overhead like a cathedral. Ancient tapestries hung from the walls, depicting the Stormfrost Pack's 1,000-year history. But even they looked faded now, covered in a thin layer of frost that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single massive block of ice that never melted even in summer before the curse, sat the Alpha King. Seren's breath caught. Even dying, even covered in a thin sheen of frost that made him look like a statue carved from ice, Kale Stormfrost was magnificent. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall, even seated with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his failing pack. His hair was black as a raven's wing, shot through with silver that marked him as ancient bloodline, and it hung loose past his shoulders, some sections frosted with actual ice. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, or a frozen waterfall. His lips had a blue tint. His fingernails were white. Frost clung to his eyelashes. But it was his eyes that struck Seren hardest. Ice blue, pale as frozen water. They should have been beautiful. Instead, they looked dead. Empty. Like the light behind them was slowly going out. And in them, Seren saw death approaching on silent feet. Around the throne, his court stood in loose groups. She recognized the types from her own pack before they'd cast her out. The beta, with gray-streaked hair and worried eyes. The healers in their ceremonial robes looking exhausted and defeated. The high-ranking warriors who stood guard despite being half-starved themselves. And the nobles who whispered behind their hands already maneuvering for position in case their alpha died. All of them looked at Seren with the same expression. Doubt mixed with desperate, dying hope. Who is this? Kyle's voice was deep, rough, edged with pain he was fighting to hide. An Omega Alpha, the scarred guard said. She claims to know what afflicts you, claims she can help. Kael's gaze fell on Seren, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing. For a long moment he just stared, taking in her starving frame, her Omega silver hair, her threadbare clothes. Then he laughed, a bitter, broken sound. An Omega. Of course. Send me an Omega when I'm dying. Why not? He waved a dismissive hand. Send her away. I don't have time for this. Please, Seren stepped forward despite her fear, despite her weakness. I know what's wrong with you. This winter it's not natural. It's a blood curse woven into your family line generations ago. It's turning you to ice from the inside out. Kael's expression went very still. How do you know that? Because my grandmother taught me to recognize the signs. Seren met his ice-blue eyes steadily. The way your fingers have gone numb, the way your heartbeat has slowed, the way you can't feel warmth anymore, no matter how close you get to the fire. She watched his face and saw the truth of her words strike home. He didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. The healers don't know what it is, Seren continued, because they've forgotten the old ways. But I haven't, and I know how to break it. You, Kael's lip curled. A starving Omega knows what my healers trained for decades cannot. Yes. Why should I believe you? Seren met his gaze without flinching. Because you're dying and you have nothing left to lose. Because your pack is dying. Because winter will never end until the curse is broken. She pulled the herb pouch from her belt and held it up. I have what's needed. Frost whisper root, sunwarmer leaves, starfire petals. Herbs grown before this winter began. Paired with the ancestral chants brewed at the right moon phase, they can break even a blood curse. Kael stared at the small leather pouch like it was a weapon. And why would you help me? What do you want in return? Seren's answer was simple, honest. I want to live, and I can't do that if winter never ends. Truth, plain and unadorned. No games, no manipulation, just a starving Omega who wanted to survive. Kael studied her face for a long time. Seren watched him weighing his options, measuring her worth against his pride. Finally he spoke. If you fail, you die. Understood. If I fail, we all die, Seren replied. The curse won't stop with you. It'll consume the whole pack, then spread beyond. Eventually, the entire north will be frozen wasteland. Kael's jaw clenched. He looked at his beta, a gray-haired wolf standing beside the throne. Garrick. The beta's expression was grim. The healers give you 3 days, my lord. Maybe 4. We have nothing to lose. Kael closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they'd hardened with decision. Fine. You have until the next full moon. 3 days. He pointed at Seren. If you can break this curse, name your price. Anything in my power to give. And if she can't, someone called from the gathered court. Then we'll all freeze together, Kael said flatly. He stood a clear effort, though he tried to hide it, and gestured to a servant. Give her whatever she needs. A room, food, access to the kitchens. His gaze found Seren again. Save us, Omega, or die trying. They gave Seren a small room in the servants' quarters, simple but warmer than her cave. A real bed with actual blankets, a table and chair, a window that looked out over the frozen forest. It felt like luxury, and they fed her. Not much. Food was still scarce throughout the pack, but enough. Warm broth thick with vegetables, bread that was only slightly stale, even a piece of dried meat. Seren ate slowly, forcing herself not to devour it all at once. Her starving body wanted to gorge, but she knew that would only make her sick. She needed to be strong for what was coming. She needed steady hands and a clear head. After eating, she sat at the small table in her room and carefully laid out her herbs. This was sacred work. Her grandmother had taught her to treat every herb with reverence, to thank each plant for the gift of its medicine. Plants remember, Narita had said. They remember the songs we sing them, the respect we show them. Treat them well and they'll lend you their power when you need it most. Seren ran her fingers over each herb, feeling their textures, breathing in their scents, reconnecting with knowledge she'd kept alive through 3 years of starvation and loneliness. After eating, she sat at the small table and carefully laid out her 3 herbs, frost whisper root, sunwarmer leaves, and starfire petals. Each one a piece of her grandmother's legacy. Each one essential to breaking the curse. The words felt right, ancient, powerful, but they needed to be woven into the brewing at exactly the right moments under the full moon's light while the Alpha King drank the mixture. And there was risk. The curse was tied to his bloodline. Breaking it would require touching that blood magic, directly channeling it through herself as a conduit. If she wasn't strong enough, it would kill her. If she made even one mistake in the chant or the brewing, it would kill them both. Seren looked at her trembling hands and forced them still. She could do this. She had to do this. For the pack, for the world, for herself. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Enter, she called. The door opened, and a young Omega stepped inside. She couldn't have been more than 18 with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much hardship. She carried a basin of warm water and clean cloths. Luna, the girl said, softly setting the basin on the table. I brought water for washing. And she hesitated. I wanted to thank you for trying. Seren felt a warmth in her chest at the word Luna. She wasn't a Luna. She was just an Omega who'd been cast out. But the girl's use of the title spoke volumes about how desperate the pack had become. They were looking for hope anywhere they could find it. You don't need to call me that. My name is Seren. The girl smiled, small and shy. I'm Leora. My mother died from the cold 2 weeks ago. She couldn't get warm anymore. No matter what we did. Leora's eyes filled with tears. If you can stop this winter, if you can save the Alpha and bring back spring, then you're Luna to me, to all of us. Seren stood and crossed to the girl, pulling her into a gentle embrace. Leora was taller than her, but she folded into Seren's arms like a child seeking comfort. I'll do everything I can. Seren promised. I won't give up. Leora pulled back, wiping her eyes. Is there anything you need? Anything I can help with? Seren looked at the herbs on the table, then back at the young Omega. Actually, yes. Would you like to learn? Leora's eyes widened. Learn the old ways. Seren nodded. My grandmother always said that knowledge dies when we stop teaching it. If I succeed, someone else needs to know these things, in case they're needed again. Leora's face lit up with something Seren hadn't seen in any wolf since arriving at the fortress. Hope. Real bright hope. I would be honored. They spent the next hour together, Seren teaching Leora to recognize each herb, to understand its properties, to respect the medicine it offered. Leora proved to be a quick learner, her questions intelligent, her focus absolute. She handled the frost whisper root with reverence, breathed in the scent of the sunwarmer's leaves with wonder, and gazed at the starfire petals like they were pieces of the sky itself. This is beautiful, Leora whispered, holding one petal up to the candlelight. I never knew plants could be like this. Most wolves don't anymore, Seren said sadly. The old ways taught us to see magic in growing things, in the turn of seasons, in the relationship between earth and sky. But we forgot. We started valuing only teeth and claws and dominance. Will you teach others? Leora asked. If you save the Alpha, will you teach the pack? Seren smiled. If I save the Alpha, I'll teach anyone who wants to learn. After Leora left, Seren stood at the window looking out at the frozen landscape. The moon was rising, not yet full, but close. Tomorrow night it would reach its peak. Tomorrow night she would attempt the impossible. She was still standing there when she heard the door open again. She turned, expecting Leora returning with something she'd forgotten. Instead, Kale Stormfrost stood in the doorway. Seren's breath caught. The Alpha King didn't visit servants' quarters, didn't lower himself to seek out Omegas in their rooms. Yet here he was, massive and ice-touched and dying, filling the small space with his presence. Alpha Seren said, uncertain. Should I sit? Kale said, his voice rough. I'm not here as your king. I'm here as someone who needs to understand what you're about to do. Slowly, Seren sat. Kale took the other chair, his large frame seeming too big for the small room. This close, she could see the signs of the curse clearly. The blue tint to his lips, the way frost seemed to cling to his skin no matter the temperature. The exhaustion in his eyes that came from a body slowly shutting down. Tell me, Kale said, truly. Can you break this curse, or are you giving us false hope? Seren met his gaze. I can break it, but there's risk. The curse is tied to your blood. To break it, I'll need to channel the magic through myself. If I'm not strong enough, she paused, it could kill me. And if it does, the backlash might kill you too. Kale was quiet for a long moment. And you're willing to take that risk for a pack that isn't yours, for an Alpha you don't know. I'm willing to take that risk to end this winter, Seren said simply. I'm tired of being cold, tired of starving, tired of watching the world die. Kale's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're braver than you look, Omega. I'm more desperate than I look, Seren corrected. This time Kale did smile, though it was sad. Why did your pack cast you out? The question caught her off guard. How did you have no scent of pack on you, Kale said. You were alone in that cave, and Omegas are never alone by choice. What happened? Seren's throat tightened. They said I was useless. No mate, no children, no value. Just another mouth to feed. She looked away. They were probably right. They were fools. Seren looked back at him, startled. Kale's ice-blue eyes held hers. You know things they've forgotten. You can do what they cannot. That's not useless. That's invaluable. Something warm unfurled in Seren's chest. Something she'd thought long dead. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for belonging, for being seen, for mattering. If I save you, she said quietly, if I break this curse and your pack survives, I want sanctuary, a place here. I don't want to go back to dying alone in a cave. If you save us, Kale replied, you can name anything you want, anything. Their eyes held for a long moment. Seren felt something pass between them. Not just gratitude or desperation, something deeper. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. Kale seemed to feel it too. He stood abruptly, wincing slightly at the movement. The full moon rises tomorrow night. Will you be ready? Yes. He nodded once and turned to leave. At the door he paused. Seren. Yes, thank you for trying. Then he was gone, leaving Seren alone with her racing heart and the herbs that held all their futures. She spent the rest of the night reviewing every detail, every step of the ritual, every word of the chant. She couldn't afford mistakes, couldn't afford uncertainty. Lives depended on her. The entire pack, the entire North, maybe the entire world if the winter continued to spread. As dawn broke gray and pale through the endless clouds, Seren made a decision. She would succeed, not because she was strong, not because she was special, but because she carried something everyone else had forgotten. The knowledge that power comes in many forms, that the smallest wolf, the overlooked one, can carry the warmth needed to break an eternal winter. Her grandmother had been right all along. The day passed in a blur. Leora brought her food, which Seren ate mechanically. Other servants came and went, preparing the ceremonial space in the great courtyard where the ritual would take place. Beta Garrick stopped by to ensure she had everything she needed. The bronze cauldron, the iron tripod, the wood for the fire, all the tools used in rituals exactly like this one centuries ago before the packs forgot the old ways. As the sun began to set, such as it was through the gray clouds, Seren dressed in the clothes the pack had provided. Simple white robes, clean and new. Leora came to help her braid her silver hair, weaving winter roses into the plaits. The roses were a gift from Elder Rowena Winterwillow, the oldest wolf in the pack who'd come to Seren's room that morning and knelt before her with tears in her eyes. My grandmother knew the old ways, Rowena had whispered, but I was young and foolish, and I didn't listen when she tried to teach me. Now that knowledge is lost. She'd taken Seren's hands in her aged ones. If you save us, Luna, please teach us. Help us remember what we've forgotten. Seren had promised. And now as she looked at herself in the small mirror, flowers woven into her hair, white robes marking her as someone sacred rather than worthless, she felt the weight of that promise. This wasn't just about breaking a curse. It was about proving that the old ways still had value, that Omega's grandmothers and forgotten knowledge could save the world when teeth and claws and dominance failed. The moon began to rise as Seren walked to the courtyard. Not yet full, but close. So close. The entire pack had gathered. Hundreds of wolves, some in human form, some in wolf form, all hollow-eyed and shivering, desperate for anything that might break the curse, killing them all. They formed a wide circle around the ritual space, giving Seren room to work, but pressing close enough to see. She felt their eyes on her like a physical weight, their hope, their doubt, their desperation. If she failed, she wouldn't just die. She'd take their last hope with her. At the center of the courtyard, the bronze cauldron hung over a small fire in an iron tripod. Ancient tools used for exactly this purpose 1,000 years ago. Seren's hands shook as she approached them. She knelt beside the fire and added wood, coaxing the flames higher. Kale appeared through the crowd which parted before him like water. He was flanked by Beta Garrick and several high-ranking wolves. But even surrounded, he looked alone, isolated by his impending death. He'd dressed in ceremonial robes for the occasion, white fur trimmed with silver thread, ancient and beautiful. The same robes every AlphaKing had worn for 1,000 years during important rituals. They hung slightly loose on his frame now. Even in just 3 days, the curse had taken more of him. He looked like a king from the old stories, like the legends her grandmother used to tell. Their eyes met across the ritual space, and Seren saw the question there. Are you sure? Really sure. She nodded, forcing confidence she didn't quite feel. Kale took his place beside the cauldron, standing so close she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin, like he was carved from ice instead of flesh. The moon continued to rise over the mountain peaks, full and bright, casting silver light over the snow-covered courtyard. Its light seemed to make the frost glow, transforming the dying pack into something beautiful and terrible. It was time. Seren pulled out her herbs with trembling fingers. The small leather pouch felt impossibly light for something that held all their hopes. She looked up at the moon, then at Kale, then at the hundreds of wolves watching with desperate eyes. She thought of her grandmother, of Lyora, of Elder Rowena, of every Omega who'd ever been called useless, of every piece of forgotten knowledge that had been lost when the world stopped listening to the small, the old, the overlooked. And she began. The moon hung full and bright above the Sawtooth Mountains, casting its silver light across the courtyard where hundreds of desperate wolves waited in silence. Seren stood before the bronze cauldron, the leather pouch containing her grandmother's herbs clutched in her trembling hands. The weight of every watching eye pressed down on her like physical force. She could hear her own heartbeat loud in the stillness, could feel the cold air burning in her lungs with each breath, could see Kyle standing beside her, frost clinging to his skin, death creeping closer with every passing moment. This was it. Everything her grandmother had prepared her for, everything she'd kept alive through starvation and loneliness and exile. All of it came down to this single night, this single ritual, this single chance to prove that the forgotten still mattered. Seren opened the pouch with shaking fingers and drew out the first bundle of cloth. The frost whisper root lay within silver white and twisted, smelling of mint and winter and memories. She unwrapped it carefully, reverently, the way her grandmother had taught her. Plants remember, little one. Treat them with respect. The watching wolves leaned forward, even those too weak to stand properly, strained to see what this strange Omega was doing. What impossible things she thought could save them. Seren held the root up to the moonlight. It seemed to glow in her palm, silver threads running through its twisted form like veins of pure winter. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice guiding her. This is the foundation, child. The anchor. Without this, nothing else will hold. She began to crumble the root between her fingers, letting the pieces fall into the water that already simmered in the cauldron. As each fragment touched the surface, she spoke the first words of the ancestral chant, her voice clear and strong despite her fear. Ice that binds in winter's breath. The reaction was immediate. The water in the cauldron began to change, turning from clear to pale blue, the color of glacial ice. Steam rose from the surface, but it wasn't ordinary steam. It was silver white like fog made of moonlight, and it spiraled upward in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost alive. Around the courtyard, wolves gasped. Some stepped back. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with wonder. Magic like this hadn't been seen in generations. Most of them had never witnessed anything like it, had never believed such things were real. But Seren had seen it before in her grandmother's cottage on cold nights when Narita had shown her the old ways, had taught her that the world was deeper and stranger than most wolves remembered. That power came in forms they'd forgotten how to recognize. The blue water continued to swirl, the silver steam rising in coils. Seren could feel the magic beginning to build, could sense the ancient forces responding to words that hadn't been spoken in centuries. Her hands steadied. This was right. This was true. This was the knowledge her grandmother had died to preserve. She reached for the second bundle. The sun-warmer leaves rustled as she unwrapped them, golden and papery, holding summer's memory even in the depths of endless winter. These were the counterforce, the fire to combat the ice, the warmth to melt what had been frozen. Seren scattered the leaves across the surface of the blue water one by one, watching them float and spin in the currents of magic. As each leaf touched down, she continued the chant, her voice growing stronger. Blood that chills and beckons, death. Golden light bloomed in the water where each leaf landed. Not reflected light, but light that came from within the leaves themselves, as if they'd been storing sunshine all these years just for this moment. The gold began to spread through the blue, the two colors swirling together, intertwining, creating patterns of incredible beauty. And then the temperature changed. Wolves who'd been shivering in the brutal cold suddenly felt warmth touch their faces for the first time in 3 years. Real warmth. Not the false heat of a fire that couldn't quite penetrate the curse's grip, but genuine summer warmth like standing in a sunlit field. Some began to weep. Warriors who'd survived 100 battles. Elders who'd lived through centuries. Cubs who'd never known anything but cold. All of them feeling that impossible warmth and understanding, perhaps for the first time, just how much they'd lost. just how close to death they'd truly come. Seren felt tears on her own cheeks but didn't wipe them away. Her hands were occupied with the third and final bundle, the most precious, the most powerful, the binding agent that would take foundation and force and weave them into something that could shatter a blood curse. She unwrapped the starfire petals with infinite care. 7 perfect pieces of concentrated magic, deep blue, with silver edges that seemed to shift and shimmer in the moonlight. These had been in her family for 200 years, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, waiting for exactly this moment. One for the sun, one for the moon, one for each of the 5 wandering stars. 7 petals to bind the magic of heaven and earth together. Seren held the first petal between her fingers, feeling its delicate texture, its impossible lightness. She looked up at the moon, then at the hundreds of watching wolves, then finally at Kale. His ice-blue eyes met hers, and in them she saw trust. Absolute, complete trust. He was placing his life, his pack's survival, his entire world in her hands. She would not fail him. Seren dropped the first petal into the swirling mixture of blue and gold. As it touched the surface, she began the binding words. By root and leaf and starfire's glow, I call the warmth from long ago. The petal dissolved instantly, and where it had been a point of pure silver light appeared. Not blue like ice, not gold like summer, but silver like the moon itself. The light didn't fade. It hung in the water, pulsing gently, and Seren knew she'd done it right. She dropped the second petal, the third, the fourth, each one creating another point of silver light until the cauldron held a constellation, a reflection of the night sky itself captured in water and magic and the desperate hope of a dying pack. The fifth petal, the sixth. The light was so bright now that wolves had to shield their eyes, unable to look directly at the cauldron's contents. But Seren didn't look away. She watched the magic build, watched centuries of forgotten knowledge become power, become hope, become salvation. She held the seventh and final petal, the last piece of her grandmother's legacy. As she prepared to drop it, she spoke the rest of the binding words, her voice ringing clear across the courtyard. Ancestors' wisdom, hear my plea. Break the curse and set them free. The seventh petal touched the water's surface. The cauldron erupted in light blue and gold and silver all at once, so bright it seemed to turn night into day. The light was beautiful, terrible, holy. It was everything the old ways had ever been, concentrated into a single moment of pure, undeniable magic. Wolves fell to their knees, some in awe, some in prayer, some simply because their legs wouldn't hold them anymore in the face of such power. Seren reached for the bronze cup that sat beside the cauldron and dipped it into the glowing mixture. Her hands were completely steady now. All fear had burned away in the presence of the magic her grandmother had taught her to channel. She was not alone in this. Nerita was with her. Every grandmother who'd ever passed these teachings down was with her. Every Omega who'd ever been called useless and overlooked was with her. She held the cup out to Kale. Drink, she said, all of it. And whatever happens, don't fight the magic. Kale took the cup. Their fingers brushed and Seren felt a jolt run through her. Not magic, though there was magic in it. Something else. Something primal and terrifying and right. Something that made her breath catch and her heart race. But there was no time to examine it. No time to understand what that touch had meant. Kale raised the cup to his lips and drank. The effect was immediate and devastating. He gasped, his entire body going rigid. The cup fell from his hands, clattering on the stone. Frost erupted from his skin, not just a coating, but thick ice that spread across his chest, up his neck, over his face. The curse was fighting back, trying to finish what it had started, trying to claim him completely before the magic could break its hold. No, someone shouted from the crowd. It's killing him. Stand back, Seren commanded, her voice ringing with authority she didn't know she possessed. Don't interfere. But she could see the fear in the watching wolves' eyes, could see them starting to doubt, starting to think that maybe this had been a terrible mistake, that maybe the starving Omega had just murdered their AlphaKing. Seren placed both hands on Kael's chest directly over his heart and felt the curse beneath her palms. It was alive, malevolent, a thing of pure hatred woven into his bloodline generations ago by someone who'd wanted the Stormfrost Pack to suffer and die. It recognized her touch as a threat and surged upward, trying to consume her too. Pain exploded through Serene's hands as ice raced up her arms. It burned like fire, like acid, like every terrible thing she'd ever felt concentrated into pure agony. But she held on. She had to hold on, because this was the moment her grandmother had warned her about. The moment when she had to become the conduit, channeling the magic through herself to break the curse from the inside. She began the second half of the chant, her voice strained with pain but unwavering in its purpose. From frozen veins and hearts of stone, the ice spread further up her arms across her shoulders, beginning to creep toward her throat. Seren could feel the curse trying to choke her, trying to silence the words that were breaking its power. But she'd been starving in a cave 4 days ago. She'd been called worthless and useless and cast out to die. She'd survived all of that. This curse, ancient and powerful as it was, would not stop her now. Restore the warmth they've never known. Power surged through Seren, vast and ancient and terrifying. The curse was a living thing beneath her hands, writhing and fighting, pouring centuries of accumulated hatred and cold into her body. But the magic of the ritual was older still, the wisdom of grandmothers teaching granddaughters, the knowledge kept alive by those the world had forgotten. That power flowed through Seren like a river of liquid fire, burning away the ice, melting the curse's grip. She felt the moment it began to break, felt the curse crack like ice under a hammer. And then something else happened, something Seren hadn't expected, something that changed everything. A bond snapped into place between her and Kael. Not the curse, not the magic of the ritual, something deeper, something that felt like recognition, like two pieces of the same soul binding each other after being separated for lifetimes. Mate bond. The realization hit Seren like a physical blow. She and Kael were mates, true mates, the rarest thing in the wolf world, souls meant to be together, two halves of a perfect whole. The bond had been there all along, dormant, waiting, but the curse had prevented it from fully forming, had kept Kael's soul too frozen to respond. Now as the curse broke, as warmth returned to his blood and his heart, the bond ignited like a star being born. Golden light exploded outward from where Seren's hands touched Kael's chest. Not the silver of moon magic, or the blue of ice, or the gold of summer, but a new color entirely. The color of a mate bond activating, of two souls recognizing each other, of love and sacrifice and desperate hope all woven together. The wave of light swept across the courtyard, across the fortress, across the entire mountain. Everywhere it touched, ice shattered, snow melted, frost that had clung to stone for 3 years evaporated like morning dew. The temperature surged upward from -40 degrees to 50 above in a matter of seconds. Spring didn't creep in slowly. It crashed down like a flood, like a dam breaking, like 3 years of stolen warmth returning all at once. Seren felt the curse break completely, felt it shatter into 1,000 pieces and dissolve like salt in water. Felt Kael's heart, which had been beating so slowly, so weakly, suddenly surge with renewed strength and warmth and life. But the backlash hit her like a mountain falling. All that power and all that magic with nowhere left to go. It tore through her body, burning and freezing and ripping and healing all at once. It was too much. Her human form couldn't contain it, couldn't channel, it couldn't survive it. Seren screamed, the sound raw and terrible, and then her legs gave out. She was falling, the world spinning, darkness rushing up to claim her. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Kael. He held her against his chest, his warm chest, and she could feel his heart beating strong and steady beneath her cheek. Alive. He was alive. The curse was broken. She'd done it. Seren Kael's voice was desperate, afraid. Stay with me. Please stay with me. She tried to speak, tried to tell him it was okay, that it had worked, that spring was here. But the words wouldn't come. The darkness was too strong, pulling her down into depths where there was no pain, no cold, no fear. Just silence and peace, in the distant sense that she'd done what she came to do. The last thing Seren heard before the darkness claimed her completely was Kael's voice, broken with grief and fear. Don't leave me, please. I just found you. And then there was nothing. When consciousness tried to return, it came in fragments. Pieces of awareness floating in an ocean of darkness. Warmth, real warmth soaking into her bones. The smell of spring, green growing things, wet earth, life returning, voices distant and worried. The healers say she channeled too much power. Her body couldn't handle it. That was Beta Garrick, his rough voice tight with concern. She saved us all. Kael's voice closer. She brought back spring. She broke the curse. And I can't lose her. Not now, not when I just found her. The Alpha sits with her every day, my lady. Leora's young voice speaking to someone else. He hasn't left her side in 3 days. He barely eats, barely sleeps. Just sits there holding her hand and talking to her. 3 days. Seren had been unconscious for 3 days. She tried to open her eyes, tried to speak, but her body wouldn't obey. The darkness pulled her back down. More fragments. More pieces of a world she couldn't quite reach. The pack is celebrating in the courtyards. Garrick's voice again. First true celebration in 3 years. Cubs playing in the sunshine. Gardens already starting to bloom. It's a miracle. She's the miracle. KL. Always KL's voice close and warm and filled with something that made Seren's sleeping heart ache. Every omega they ever called useless. Every piece of knowledge they ever discarded. She carried it all and used it to save us. She deserves to see what she's created. The mate bond, my lord. Garrick carefully. The healers confirmed it. The bond formed during the ritual. That's probably what saved both of you. 2 souls stronger than one. I know, Kale's voice was soft wondering. I felt it. When she was breaking the curse, when the magic was at its peak, I felt her soul touch mine. And it was like coming home. Like finding something I didn't know I'd been missing my entire life. Seren wanted to tell him she'd felt it too. That in that moment of breaking the curse, she'd understood that they were meant to be together. That fate or the Maz or Sursai or simple chance had brought a cast-out Omega Ball and a dying Alpha King together precisely when they needed each other most. But the words stayed locked inside and the darkness rose again. More time, more fragments. It's been 5 days, my lord. You need to rest. Leora worried. You haven't slept properly since she collapsed. I sleep here. KL, stubborn, refusing to leave. I won't risk her waking up alone and afraid. The Luna would want you to take care of yourself. She's not Luna yet. KL soft. She hasn't accepted the mate bond, hasn't chosen to stay. When she wakes up, I'll ask her. I'll tell her what she is to me, to the pack, to everything. And I'll hope she says yes. 5 days. Seren had been unconscious for 5 days. Her body felt heavy, distant, like it belonged to someone else. But beneath the exhaustion, she could feel strength slowly returning. Could feel her soul knitting itself back together after being nearly torn apart by the magic she'd channeled. And beneath that constant and warm and right, she could feel the mate bond. A golden thread connecting her to Kale. Even unconscious, even hovering between life and death, she could sense him nearby. Could feel his worry, his hope, his absolute unwillingness to let her go. More time passed. How much Seren couldn't tell. But the fragments of consciousness came more frequently now. Stayed longer. Let her understand more of what was happening in the world she'd saved. The pack wants to thank her. Garrick. The courtyards are filled with offerings, flowers, food, herbs, things they're growing in gardens that were dead for 3 years. Everyone wants to show gratitude. She'd be overwhelmed, KO protective even now. She was starving in a cave when my guards found her. Cast out and dying. And she still chose to save us. She'll need time to adjust to being valued. She's already valued, my lord. Elder Rowena's aged voice full of warmth. Every Omega in the pack is calling her Luna. Every elder is asking when she'll teach the old ways. Every mother is telling her cubs stories about the smallest wolf who carried the warmth needed to break eternal winter. She's not just valued, she's beloved. 6 days, 7. The world grew clearer, the fragments longer. Seren could feel her body now really feel it. Could sense the warmth of sunlight streaming through a window. Could smell flowers, real flowers blooming in what must be gardens brought back to life by the return of spring. And always, always she could feel Kael's presence, his hand holding hers, his voice reading to her from old books about pack history and traditions, his warmth beside her when exhaustion finally forced him to sleep in the chair by her bed. On the 7th day, Seren finally managed to open her eyes. The room was large and beautiful. Nothing like the servants' quarters where she'd stayed before the ritual. This was a proper bedchamber fit for nobility, with carved wooden furniture and thick furs on the bed and tapestries on the walls depicting forests and mountains and running wolves. Sunlight, real sunlight, not the pale gray light of endless winter poured through tall windows. And beside the bed, slumped in a chair with his hand still holding hers, was Kael. He looked different than she remembered. The blue tint was gone from his lips. The frost no longer clung to his skin. His hair was still black shot through with silver, but now it looked distinguished rather than dying. He looked warm, alive, healthy, beautiful in a way that made her heart ache. He also looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw. Clothes rumpled from sleeping in a chair for days. Seren tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She managed a small sound, barely more than a breath. Kale's eyes snapped open. For a heartbeat, he just stared at her, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then his face transformed with relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Seren, he breathed. You're awake. Thank the gods you're awake. He stood quickly leaning over her, one hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. How do you feel? Are you in pain? Should I call the healers? Water, Seren managed to whisper. Kale grabbed a pitcher from the bedside table and poured water into a cup, then helped her sit up enough to drink. The water was cool and sweet, and Seren drank it gratefully, feeling strength begin to return to her body with each swallow. How long, she asked when she could speak again. 7 days, KL said, setting the cup aside but keeping one hand on hers, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. You've been unconscious for 7 days. The healers weren't sure you'd wake at all. The amount of magic you channeled, he stopped, his jaw clenching. You could have died, should have died, but I didn't, Seren said softly. Did it work? The curse completely broken, Kale said, and his smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I'm warm for the first time in 3 years. We all are. He gestured to the window. Spring came the moment the curse shattered. The snow melted in hours. Plants are already growing. The rivers are flowing again. You saved us, Seren. You saved everyone. Tears sprang to Seren's eyes. Relief, joy, exhaustion. All of it overwhelming. It worked. The old ways worked. Of course they did, KL said gently. Your grandmother taught you true knowledge, real power, the kind we'd forgotten existed. He paused and something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable and hopeful and afraid all at once. There's something else, something that happened during the ritual. Seren felt the mate bond pulse between them, golden and warm and right. She met his eyes. The mate bond. Kale's breath caught. You felt it too. It wasn't a question, but Seren answered anyway. Yes. When I was breaking the curse, when the magic was at its peak, I felt our souls touch. She reached up with her free hand and placed it over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady. We're mates, Kale, true mates. We are, Kale agreed, his voice rough with emotion. And I know we barely know each other. I know you didn't ask for this. But Seren, if you'll have me, if you'll stay, I want to accept this bond. I want you as my mate, my Luna, my queen. Seren looked at him, this AlphaKing who'd given her a chance when he had every reason not to, who'd trusted her knowledge when everyone else called it superstition, who'd sat by her bedside for 7 days refusing to leave, holding her hand through the darkness. And she thought about Leora learning the old ways, about Elder Rowena asking to remember what had been forgotten, about a pack that was calling her Luna before she'd ever claimed the title, about a world where Omegas and grandmothers and forgotten knowledge could be valued again. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll be your mate. Your Luna. She smiled, small and tired but genuine. You said I could name anything I wanted if I saved you. This is what I want. A place here. A purpose. A chance to teach what my grandmother taught me. You'll have all of that and more, Kale promised. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. You've already started teaching. Leora hasn't stopped talking about the herbs you showed her. Rowena is organizing other elders who want to learn. The pack is ready to remember the old ways, Good Seren whispered, because there's so much to teach. So much that was almost lost. But it wasn't lost, Kel said, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. You kept it alive. You carried it through starvation and exile and loneliness. And when the moment came, you used it to save us all. That's not just brave Seren. That's extraordinary. Seren felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were good tears. Happy tears. Tears of a wolf who'd been called worthless, finding out she was valued beyond measure. Kale wiped them away gently. Rest now. You need to recover your strength. And when you're ready, when you're well, we'll make it official. The coronation, the mate bond ceremony. All of it. How long until I can get up? Seren asked. The healer said at least another week of rest. Kale's tone was firm. You nearly died channeling that much magic. Your body needs time to heal. A week, Seren mused. And then Kale said, smiling, we start rebuilding, the pack, the old ways, everything. Together. Seren agreed, the word feeling right in her mouth, feeling like a promise, like a future. She closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted again, but this time the darkness that pulled at her wasn't frightening. It was just sleep, natural healing sleep. And she knew that when she woke, Kale would still be there. The pack would still be waiting. Spring would still be blooming outside her window. The smallest wolf had carried the warmth needed to break eternal winter. And now, finally, she could rest. 3 months had passed since the ritual that broke the curse. 3 months since Seren had channeled ancient magic through her fragile body and brought spring back to a dying world. 3 months since she'd collapsed in KL's arms and spent 7 days hovering between life and death. Now she stood before a full-length mirror in the royal chambers, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Gone was the starving Omega in threadbare rags. Gone was the hollow-eyed wolf who'd been dying in a cave. The woman in the mirror wore robes of silver and white, the traditional colors of a Luna ceremony. The fabric was soft and fine, embroidered with winter roses and crescent moons in silver thread. Her silver hair, no longer lank and dirty, had been washed and braided by Leora, and 3 other young Omegas woven through with actual winter roses that bloomed year-round now, a gift from the mountain itself. The flowers had appeared 3 days after the curse broke. White roses with silver edges growing in impossible places on sheer rock faces and in crevices where nothing should survive. Elder Rowena had wept when she'd seen them, saying they were a sign that the mountain itself was thanking Seren for bringing back life. Now those roses adorned her hair, their delicate scent filling the room. Leora stood behind her, making final adjustments to the braids, her young face glowing with pride. "You look like a true Luna," Leora said softly, "like someone from the old stories." "I feel like an imposter," Seren admitted. 3 months ago I was worthless, cast out, dying. Now I'm supposed to be a queen. "You're never worthless," a voice said from the doorway. Elder Rowena stepped into the room, moving slowly but with dignity. She was 70 years old, one of the oldest wolves in the pack, and her face was lined with centuries of wisdom. "You were overlooked. There's a difference." Rowena crossed to Seren and took her hands. "The pack has been waiting for this day, child. Not just to see their alpha take a mate, but to honor the Omega who saved them all. Who reminded them that strength comes in many forms." "I'm still learning," Seren said. "There's so much I don't know about being Luna." "Then you'll learn," Rowena said simply. "Just as you're teaching us the old ways, knowledge flows both directions." She smiled, her aged face crinkling. "Speaking of which, we have 32 students now in your school. 32 wolves who want to learn herb lore and ancestral chants and forgotten wisdom, young and old, and Omega, Beta, and even a few alphas who've set aside their pride." Seren felt warmth bloom in her chest. The school of old ways. It had started small, just Leora and a few curious Omegas. But as word spread of what Seren had done, of how ancient knowledge had saved them, when modern healing failed, more wolves had come, asking to learn, asking to remember. She'd set up the school in one of the fortress's unused halls, a beautiful space with tall windows that let in sunlight. Every morning she taught willing students about herbs that healed and protected, about chants that called on ancestral wisdom, about the relationship between earth and sky plant and wolf-old knowledge and new application. And every morning she felt her grandmother's presence beside her, felt Narita's pride in knowing that the knowledge hadn't died, that it was being passed on, kept alive, given new life in a pack that had almost forgotten it existed. "They're waiting for you," Rowena said gently. "The whole pack. It's time." Seren took a deep breath and nodded. Leora handed her a small bouquet of winter roses, and together they walked through the fortress toward the great courtyard where the ceremony would take place. The same courtyard where 3 months ago Seren had performed the ritual that broke the curse, where she'd channeled magic that should have killed her, where she'd discovered she was Kael's true mate. Now the courtyard was transformed. No snow, no ice, no desperate starving wolves huddled against the cold. Instead there were flowers. Gardens that had been dead for 3 years now, bloomed with impossible vitality. Roses and lilies and a dozen other species, all thriving in the warm summer sun. The stone walls that had been covered in frost were now draped with flowering vines. The courtyard that had been a place of desperation was now a place of celebration, and it was filled with wolves. Hundreds of them, maybe 1,000. The entire pack gathered to witness their AlphaKing take a mate, to honor the Omega who'd saved them, to celebrate the first Luna coronation in a decade. They stood in loose groups, talking and laughing, their faces healthy and full of life. Cubs played in the gardens, chasing each other through the flowers, their laughter bright and joyful. Warriors stood tall and strong, no longer weakened by starvation and cold. Elders sat in places of honor, their aged faces peaceful. As Seren appeared at the entrance to the courtyard, a hush fell over the crowd. Thousands of eyes turned to her. And then someone began to clap, then another, until the entire courtyard erupted in applause, the sound like thunder rolling across the mountains. Seren felt tears prick her eyes. These wolves, who had been so desperate, so close to death, were now vibrant and alive, and they were celebrating her. Not with doubt or skepticism, but with genuine joy and gratitude. The crowd parted, creating a path down the center of the courtyard. At the far end, on a raised platform where the ritual cauldron had stood 3 months ago, was Kael. He wore ceremonial robes of black and silver, the traditional colors of the AlphaKing. He wore ceremonial robes of black and silver, the traditional colors of the AlphaKing. His ice blue eyes, which had looked dead and empty when she'd first met him, now blazed with warmth and life, and something that made her heart race. Love. That's what she saw in his eyes. Pure, undeniable love. Beside him stood Beta Garrick, looking distinguished in his own ceremonial robes. And arranged around the platform were the pack's healers, elders, and high-ranking wolves, all of them watching Seren with expressions of respect and welcome. Seren began walking down the path, Lura and Rowena flanking her. With each step, she felt the weight of what was happening. She was about to become Luna, about to accept a mate bond with an AlphaKing, about to take responsibility for an entire pack. But she also felt ready. These 3 months had changed her. She'd recovered from the ritual, slowly regaining her strength. She'd started teaching the old ways to eager students. She'd learned pack politics from Garrick and healing techniques from the pack's head healer and history from Rowena. She'd walked through the fortress and the surrounding lands, seeing with her own eyes the miracle of spring's return. And she'd spent time with Kael. Long conversations late into the night, walks through the newly blooming gardens, quiet moments where they'd simply sat together, feeling the mate bond pulse between them growing stronger with each passing day. She'd learned that he was more than just an AlphaKing. He was intelligent and thoughtful with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He was kind to those weaker than himself, firm, but fair with those who challenged him. He valued wisdom over brute strength, understanding over blind obedience. He was exactly the kind of alpha who would let an omega teach the old ways, who would recognize that power came in forms most wolves had forgotten. And he loved her. Not because she'd saved him, though he was grateful. Not because of the mate bond, though that was real and powerful. But because of who she was, the knowledge she carried, the strength she'd shown, the gentleness with which she taught, the way she saw value in the overlooked and forgotten. Seren reached the platform and climbed the steps. Kael extended his hand and she took it, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch, the rightness of their connection. The crowd fell silent. Kael's voice rang out across the courtyard, strong and clear. 3 months ago, this pack was dying. We'd survived 3 years of cursed winter, but we were losing. Warriors were falling, cubs were starving, elders were freezing. I myself was 3 days from death when my guards brought me a starving omega from a cave at the base of our mountain. He looked at Seren, his eyes warm. Everyone doubted her. She was worthless, they said, an omega with no value. How could she save us when our healers trained for decades had failed? Kael's grip on Seren's hand tightened. But she knew what they'd forgotten. She carried knowledge passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, kept alive by those the world overlooked. And she used that knowledge to break a curse that had plagued my bloodline for generations. She channeled magic that should have killed her. She brought back spring. She saved us all. The crowd erupted in cheers. Wolves howled their approval, the sound echoing off the mountains. Kael waited for silence, then continued. But she did more than just break a curse. She reminded us of something we'd lost. That strength comes in many forms. That the smallest wolf can carry the greatest warmth. That knowledge and wisdom and the old ways still have value in our modern world. He turned to face Seren fully, both hands now holding hers. Seren Ashglade, you are my true mate, the other half of my soul. And if you'll have me, I want to make that bond official before the pack. I want you as my Luna, my queen, my partner in all things. Seren felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. I accept, she said, her voice clear despite her emotion. I accept the mate bond. I accept the responsibility of being Luna, and I promise to serve this pack with everything I have for as long as I live. Kael smiled, brilliant and joyful, and reached for something Garrick was holding, a crown. Not the massive, heavy thing Seren had imagined, but a delicate circlet of white gold set with moonstones that caught the light like captured stars. It was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant without being ostentatious. Kael placed the crown on Seren's head with gentle hands. I present to you, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, Luna Seren Stormfrost. Curse breaker, keeper of the old ways, bringer of spring, teacher of forgotten wisdom, and my true mate. The pack erupted again, louder this time. Wolves howled and cheered and stamped their feet. The sound was deafening, joyful, a celebration 3 years in the making. Kael pulled Seren close and kissed her, his lips warm against hers, his arms strong around her waist. The mate bond flared between them, golden and bright and right. and Seren knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they finally parted, both breathless, Kael whispered in her ear, "Welcome home, Luna." The feast that followed was unlike anything Seren had ever experienced. Tables groaned with food, real food fresh and abundant. Roasted meats and baked bread and vegetables from gardens brought back to life. Fruit that had been impossible to grow during the cursed winter. Wine and mead that had been saved for a celebration just like this. Wolves ate and drank and laughed, celebrating not just the coronation but survival itself. The return of warmth and life and hope. Cubs ran through the courtyard playing games that would have been impossible 3 months ago. Warriors arm wrestled and told stories. Elders sat in comfortable chairs watching it all with peaceful smiles. Seren sat beside Kael at the high table, still feeling overwhelmed by it all. But every time she started to feel lost, Kael's hand would find hers under the table, grounding her, reminding her she wasn't alone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that hadn't been seen in 3 years, Elder Rowena approached the high table. She bowed to Seren, then straightened with a request in her eyes. "Luna," the old woman said, her voice carrying across the courtyard, "may I ask something of you?" "Of course," Seren said. Rowena gestured to a group of Omegas standing nearby. All of them, young all of them, looking at Seren with hopeful eyes. "We wish to learn, not just the 32 students in your school, but all of us. Every Omega, every Beta, every wolf who wants to remember what was forgotten." She paused. "My grandmother knew the old ways. She tried to teach me when I was young, but I was foolish. I thought teeth and claws were all that mattered. I didn't listen." Rowena's eyes filled with tears. "And now that knowledge is lost. The stories she could have told, the herbs she could have taught me to recognize, the chants she knew, all gone because I thought they were useless." Seren stood and crossed to Rowena, taking the old woman's hands in hers. "They're not gone," she said gently. "Not completely. Some of it survived. My grandmother kept it alive. And now I'll pass it on to you, to anyone who wants to learn." "You'll teach us?" Rowena asked, hope brightening her aged face. "I'll teach everyone," Seren said, loud enough for the entire courtyard to hear. "Young and old, Omega and Alpha, anyone who wants to know the old ways." She looked at the gathered wolves, seeing their faces turn toward her, listening. "We almost lost this knowledge. We can't let that happen again." The courtyard erupted in approval. Wolves cheered and howled their agreement. And Seren saw in their faces the same thing she'd seen in Leora's eyes 3 months ago. Hope. Real bright hope for a future that valued all kinds of strength. Over the next weeks, the School of Old Ways grew beyond anything Seren had imagined. What had started with 32 students became 50, then 100, then more than she could count. Wolves of all ages and ranks came to learn. Seren taught them about frost whisper root and sunwarmer leaves and starfire petals, about dozens of other herbs, their properties and uses, about how to recognize them in the wild, how to harvest them respectfully, how to store and prepare them. She taught them the ancestral chants her grandmother had passed down, words that called on the wisdom of those who'd come before, magic that most wolves had forgotten existed. She taught them about the relationship between the pack and the land, about respecting the forest and the mountain, about taking only what was needed and giving thanks for what was received. And she taught them the most important lesson of all, that knowledge kept alive by the overlooked and forgotten was just as valuable, just as powerful as any tooth or claw or show of dominance. Lyora became her first true apprentice, learning everything Seren could teach with an eagerness that reminded Seren of herself at that age. The young Omega had a gift for the work, gentle hands, and a sharp mind, and an instinctive understanding of how plants and magic work together. "One day you'll teach others," Seren told her, as they worked together in the herb garden they'd planted behind the school. "You'll pass this knowledge on just like my grandmother passed it to me." Lyora smiled, her face glowing with pride. "I hope I can be half the teacher you are, Luna." "You already are," Seren assured her. But Lyora wasn't the only one learning. Elder Rowena came to every class, sitting in the front row despite her age, taking careful notes. She learned the names of herbs she'd seen as a child but never valued. She learned chants her grandmother had tried to teach her 70 years ago, and she wept both for the knowledge she'd lost and the knowledge she was regaining. "Thank you," she told Seren one evening after class, "for giving me a second chance, for helping me remember." "The knowledge was always there," Seren said gently. "You just needed someone to help you find it again." Even some of the pack's warriors came to learn. Big, strong alphas who'd spent their lives valuing only physical strength. At first, they came reluctantly, sent by Kael, who'd made it clear that understanding the old ways was now expected of high-ranking wolves. But then something changed. They saw how the herbs Seren taught could heal wounds faster than anything the modern healers had. They saw how the protective chants could strengthen a wolf before battle. They saw how understanding the land made them better trackers, better hunters, better warriors. And they started coming voluntarily, asking questions, showing respect, learning. Seren watched it happen with quiet satisfaction. The pack was changing, rebalancing. Remembering that strength came in many forms. 6 months after the ritual that broke the curse, Seren stood at the window of the royal chambers, one hand resting on her gently swelling belly, 4 months pregnant. The healers had confirmed it 2 weeks ago, and Kael had wept with joy when she told him. A child, their child, the first cub born to a Luna in over a decade. Already the pack was celebrating, already preparing, already talking about the future with hope instead of fear. Outside the window, the first snow of winter was falling, real winter, natural winter, the kind that came every year and left every spring, the kind that was beautiful instead of deadly. Seren watched the snowflakes drift down, catching the afternoon light, and marveled at how different this snow was from the cursed winter that had lasted 3 years. This was gentle, temporary, part of the natural cycle of seasons. What are you thinking? Kael's voice came from behind her. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist, careful of her belly, resting his chin on her shoulder. That my grandmother was right, Seren said, leaning back against him. About everything. She said the smallest wolf would carry the warmth needed to break eternal winter. She said knowledge passed from grandmother to granddaughter could save the world. She said I would know when the moment came. She was wise, Kael murmured. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, Seren said, smiling. She always said the best alphas were the ones who knew their strength wasn't diminished by learning from others. Kael turned Seren in his arms so they were facing each other. You know what I think he said? His ice-blue eyes warm with love. I think you were never small. You just hadn't been seen yet. Seren kissed him, tasting snowflakes and spring and hope. Maybe, she said, or maybe I was always exactly the size I needed to be. Small enough to be overlooked. Small enough to survive when others fell. Small enough to carry knowledge everyone else thought was worthless. The smallest wolf, Kael agreed, smiling, carrying the greatest warmth. They stood together at the window watching snow fall on a pack that was thriving, on gardens that would sleep through winter and wake in spring, on a fortress that had been a tomb and was now a home. From the school building, Seren could see warm light spilling from the windows, her students working late into the evening learning the old ways, preserving knowledge that had almost been lost, ensuring it would survive for generations to come. In the courtyards below, cubs played in the fresh snow, their laughter bright and joyful. Warriors sparred in training yards, strong and healthy. Elders sat in comfortable rooms telling stories to young wolves who actually listened. Life. Everywhere life. Growing and thriving and spreading. And in 9 months, Seren and Kael's child would be born into this world, would grow up learning both new ways and old, would understand that strength came in many forms, would know that the smallest wolf could carry the warmth needed to save everyone. Seren felt Kael's hand cover hers on her belly, both of them protecting the life growing within. Are you happy? He asked quietly. Seren thought about it, thought about the starving Omega who'd been dying in a cave just 9 months ago, thought about how far she'd come, how much had changed. Yes, she said finally. I'm happy, I'm home, I'm valued, I'm teaching, I'm loved. She looked up at Kael. I'm everything my old pack said I could never be. You were always extraordinary, Kael said. They just couldn't see it. But you did, Seren said. You gave me a chance when you had every reason not to. You trusted me when everyone else doubted. You believed in the old ways when the world had forgotten them. I believed in you, Kael corrected. The old ways were just proof that you were right. They stood together as darkness fell, watching their packs settle in for the night, watching lights come on in windows, watching smoke rise from chimneys, watching life continue in a place that had been dead. And Seren thought about her grandmother, about Narita's weathered hands and patient voice, about the knowledge passed down through generations of overlooked wolves, about the 7 starfire petals that had waited 200 years to fulfill their purpose. The old ways had saved them. The forgotten knowledge had broken an unbreakable curse. The smallest wolf had carried the warmth needed to end eternal winter. And now finally Seren understood the last thing her grandmother had told her. When winter comes, that will not end. When the pack grows weak and the alpha's blood runs cold, that's when you'll need these little ones. That's when the smallest wolf will have to be the strongest. Not strongest in the way most wolves understood it. Not teeth or claws or dominance, but strong in knowledge, strong in wisdom. Strong in the willingness to be overlooked and undervalued and still keep precious things alive. That was the strength her grandmother had meant. That was the strength Seren had carried. And now she would pass it on to her students, to her child, to every generation that came after, ensuring the old ways never died again. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Gentle, beautiful, temporary. The first natural winter in 4 years. And inside the fortress that had been saved by forgotten magic wolves, settled in for the night warm and safe and alive. The smallest wolf had brought back spring, had broken the curse, had reminded the world that knowledge and wisdom and the old ways still mattered, and the pack would never forget again. In the fortress of the Stormfrost Pack in the Sawtooth Mountains of central Idaho, where winter had finally learned to end and spring had learned to return, Aluna stood with her mate and her unborn child and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.